Two cool bros tooting each other's horns.
We the best!
Least improved player. Scott, who is your number 3?
So for my number 3, I went with Talen Horton-Tucker of the Lakers. And yeah, he's a young guy. He's a little harsh. He's only 21. But he's an asset that they kind of held back in trade talks last year. And that kind of limited some of their trade options. And then he goes out and puts up a season where he shows no progression. I mean, his shooting gets worse. This season he shot 27% from 3. So the worst of his career. He hasn't developed that side of his game at all. He got the most chance he's had at any point in his career. But he didn't really show any progression. And the Lakers basically counted on him progressing. They weren't willing to trade him away. So not only did he not play particularly well this season, they also cost them the chance to get assets last offseason. And now they're not going to get nearly the same return they would have if they do decide to trade him. So I got him as my number 3 guy there.
Dude, that's a fantastic pick. Like, in my research, he didn't even come up, and that's amazing. That's an amazing pick. I can't believe I didn't even think about that. That was amazing.
Well, thank you. We're teaming up here, approaching it from different sides.
I think so. All right, who's your number 2 then?
My number 2, this is, I wonder if this one came up for you. Julius Randle. Well, to me, Julius Randle took a big step back too this season. Last year, he took that massive jump and was kind of point Julius, where he was able to dish out the ball, spread the floor with his three-point shooting. That's the main thing where he regressed. This last season, his three-point shooting, the last year was kind of looking like an anomaly. He shot 41% from 3 last year. This year down to 31%.
Yeah.
And you got to see it affects his entire efficiency. So it's one of those things where once he developed that 3, then the defenses had to follow him out to the line. And that opened up passing lanes. So it's one of those things, if you can't shoot the 3, you don't have to respect him as much, which makes passing harder, which makes spacing harder for the entire team. And I think, the Knicks have to be one of the most disappointing teams in the league last season, besides the Lakers. But the way they regressed from, a playoff team, this year not even making the playing game. I mean, you're not making the playing game. That's a really bad sign.
Yeah, especially when they had championship aspirations. But, dude, funny enough, Julius Randle was my number 3. So I feel like I should just bring my points up right now because he was my number 3.
Yeah, let's go for it.
So I noticed the same thing with 3-point shooting, right? Total drop-off. So then I wanted to see, because I feel like that was just an overall thing of his efficiency this year. Way less efficient this year, right? And if you're looking at, some of the basic kind of catch-all stats, right? His player efficiency rating, which we know is offensively biased anyway, dropped from a 19.7 to a 15.7. So a 4-point drop in that is pretty bad. Like, that basically went from all-star level to average player, right? His win shares per 48 minutes dropped a whole 8 hundredths. Or, they basically went from being 14% responsible for their wins last year to only being 6% responsible for their wins this year. Granted, they had less wins to get shares of, but that was a pretty big drop-off. His box plus-minus this year dropped from, he was a plus 3.8 last year in box plus-minus to only a 0.5 this year, only half a point. So he dropped basically 3.3 points overall for his team this year. And then his value over replacement players, VORP, dropped from a 3.9, which is really high, to a 1.6. That's a pretty big drop-off for a guy that was expected to be, an all-star team leader this year. So for those reasons, Julius Randle also came up as one of my least improved players.
A big part of this, too, is this was his age 27 season. That should be your prime.
Yeah,
age 27, he should still be improving. That's kind of that sweet spot where physically you're not falling off, but mentally you've learned.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm looking at it now, offensive win shares, not a perfect stat by any means, but he was actually negative this season in offensive win shares.
Yeah.
Which is kind of hard to believe. I mean, that's just kind of mind-blowing. And then, like you're saying, his WARP, value over replacement player, 1.6, which is almost equivalent to his last season with the Lakers. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, there's a reason the Lakers moved on from him. They didn't think he could be what his potential was. So to see him regress that far, it's kind of shocking how much he pulled back this season, almost across the board.
Well, and the interesting thing that I saw too, and I think you're looking at the same ones that I am on Basketball Reference, like look at his usage rate. His usage rate is almost the same, practically the same this year. Turnover percentage is practically the same. Yeah. Higher block percentage. Steal is about the same. Assist is about the same. Total rebound percentage, a little bit better this year, but basically the same. His defensive rebound percentage is exactly the same, right? He actually got more offensive rebounds this year. His free throw rate is exactly the same, like pretty much the same, 3 thousandths off. So it's like he had all these, all the counting stats didn't look very different, but man, his efficiency just plummeted.
Yeah, and it makes you, I guess in a way, it kind of highlights just how important three-point shooting is.
Yeah.
And how huge of an impact. Because I think that's the big point where he dropped off.
Yes.
And you look at true shooting percentage. True shooting percentage down 58 points.
Yeah.
Year over year. I mean, his worst true shooting percentage since his sophomore year. So, if you're not shooting the ball well, obviously, that's going to permeate throughout your entire game. Yeah. So, that was a big drop-off.
Throughout his whole team, unfortunately.
But we agree on one, at least.
Yeah. All right, so who is your number one then?
Yeah. This one, I'll be interested if this guy was on your radar. I think this is a pretty good one, not to toot my own horn, but my least improved player, De'Aaron Fox.
Oh.
So,
he did show up in my research, but he didn't show up as regressing enough for what I was looking at. So hit me with it.
Well, a big part of what I'm doing here is, I think, taking expectations into account. It's not so much that he really became a much worse player, but he's 24, or this is his age 24 season. He just signed. This is the first year of a 5-year, $163 million contract. That's cornerstone money. And they traded away Tyrese Halliburton. So this is, I mean, the team has decided he's a cornerstone. But you look at his game, he's not developing. He hasn't shown any sign he's actually going to develop a consistent three-point shot. And a guy like Halliburton, you're like, all right, maybe there's the potential there, but they stuck with Fox. I just don't know if I see it with Fox. And this was his 5th season. This isn't some rookie. So in his 5th season, he's still not showing that next level of progression. I think you could argue since his sophomore year to now, we've seen some mild progression at best. And, it's not so much that he's become a terrible player, but they're basically approaching it like they're going to build around him. And he hasn't shown anything to indicate that he could do that. I think that's the thing. Is he going to be your franchise cornerstone? Because you're paying him like that. $163 million. And you're trading away another young guard. So, for me, that was enough to make him the least improved. I think they were expecting a big jump for him. Basically went down across the board. Became less efficient. Basically did less of everything. Despite playing identical minutes. So, I think that's my number one.
That's another good pick. I mean, he definitely showed up like he was... I think in my research, he ended up being like 5 or 6 on my list. So, I think it's a fantastic pick.
It's all about... There's some difference in, how do you really weigh things like least improved? Right. Is it purely, do they get worse, or do they not develop like you hope they would? Yeah. And I think in Fox's case, it's more a lack of development. And I think you offensively need to see a lot from him, because you're not going to go, Fox will be our, the best defender on a championship team. So you're saying, I need him to be really great offensively. And all the advanced stats we were referencing earlier, he took a huge drop this season. Offensive box plus minus, 3.1 down to 0.6. Mm-hmm. Offensive win share, 3.4 down to 1.5. It's just, his true shooting is almost identical to his sophomore year. It's kind of just, would like to see more development from the age 21 to the age 24. Or I would say maybe he's treading water. I mean, by a lot of these stats, he looks worse than he did his sophomore year.
Oh, he definitely
now
got
he's
worse.
starting on a big contract.
He definitely got worse.
So, and that sophomore year, you were paying him whatever the rookie pay is, $7 million, $8 million a year, something really affordable. Now you're paying him $30+ million a year.
Yeah,
that's star money.
Yeah,
I mean that's.
And I think you hit it on the head too with them keeping him and getting rid of Halliburton. Dude, Halliburton is looking like he could be something. So them basically unloading him for really nothing, getting Sabonis, like, I don't know, it didn't do much for the Kings, in my opinion. So
no, I think it was a horrible trade.
Yeah, like they just, but that's been the history of the Kings. But anyways, we can get into that.
No, it kind of feels like picking on like someone you shouldn't pick on. You know, the Kings, it's like kind of like you feel so bad for them. You're like, maybe we just pretend they don't even count.
Well, also, as admitted biased Suns fans, it's like, hey, I was a big part of the Sun King alliance here for a while. So I don't want to hate on them too much. It's not like I don't like them. I'm rooting for them. Yeah.
Definitely. We feel their pain.
Exactly, yeah. So, okay,
right,
so I definitely agree. However, I do think I found two players that got worse.
All right, I'm very interested in who you got.
Okay, my number 2, Nikola Vucevic. If you look at his numbers, if you look at his numbers this season, and actually particularly since he was traded to Chicago last year, his player efficiency rating has dropped almost 5 points, 4.7. His win shares have dropped. His offensive win shares are down 1.9. And his box plus minus dropped from a 5.3 with Orlando on a shitty team, right, to only a 0.9 on a much better overall team. So he's been contributing less on the Bulls.
No,
right?
That's a good one.
And his value over replacement player dropped from a 4.4 on Orlando, which is like, I thought it was a great trade to get him last year at the deadline, to only a 1.8 this year. Only a 1.8. So again, like a decent player, but he was supposed to be a little bit better for the Bulls and make them better than they have been this year. Although granted, the team had a lot of injuries and things this year, but he has not been the one that has been injured. He played 73 games this year. He played over 2,400 minutes, and he was not able to kind of perform at his level that they would have expected. So he was one that dropped more than Julius Randle and more than De'Aaron Fox. Do you have any thoughts on Vucevic? I thought that was going to be a surprise pick.
That is. But now I look at the numbers, I can see where you're coming from. It certainly is this big drop-off where really his offensive efficiency seems to have just tanked.
Yeah.
And I wonder if part of that, though, is not that this makes it a good thing, but kind of like big fish in a little pond. Down in Orlando, he was the guy.
Yeah.
And maybe in Chicago, he's being asked to take on a different role. But you'd like to see him be efficient in that role. I think kind of the issue is he's not being particularly efficient.
You know who the...
And maybe his game isn't designed to work as well in that situation.
A comparison that came up to a historical comparison that came to my mind was Bosch when he joined the Heat with LeBron and Dwayne Wade, because similar kind of player playing as a big. Vucevic is all of a sudden coming into where Orlando would run the offense through him, to now he's got Levine and DeRozan this year that were running the offense through them, and he was definitely at least the third option when both of those guys were on the floor. So I think that was kind of a little Chris Bosh syndrome. That's what I would assess it as.
Yeah, it's kind of tough for a guy like that to go from being top to possibly third, and a distant third sometimes, where they're really not running through you.
Exactly.
Well, and I
think,
Kevin Love.
Same thing happened to Kevin Love, right, in Cleveland.
Kevin Love, yeah, for sure. You're top guy on a non-playoff team, and then you go to a playoff team where you have multiple weapons above you. And I think that's a great comparison. I'm just looking at Bosch's numbers right now. It's almost an identical drop-off. The same thing where his offensive numbers tanked.
Yeah.
Not to say he wasn't a good player in Miami, Bosch. He was great within his system and the fit, but he was asked to take on a much smaller role, and there's an adjustment period there.
Yeah, and I think that might be something that as the Bulls get healthy, maybe next year, if they're healthier next year and they have more minutes together, Vucevic can be more efficient with his limited opportunities. Because I think something that he had in Orlando that he doesn't have right now in the Bulls is more opportunities to get himself going, right? So I think that's, you said, I think the adjustment period is going to be rough for him. Okay, my number one kind of seems like an obvious one. I'm surprised it didn't show up in your top three, but maybe you were just trying to avoid it. But I could not avoid it. I was literally trying to because it seemed so obvious to me. But my number one was Russell Westbrook.
Oh, see? Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I guess my view, Russ is a little old.
Well, he's definitely.
And also my counter is, did Russ really change? But I want to hear your. Let me hear your argument first.
Here's why I'm saying I think he did because so last year with the Wizards, right? He played in 65 out of the 72 games. His PR was 19.5. He was getting solid win shares, box plus minus of 3.7, value over replacement player 3.4. He was still a really, really good player for the Wizards last year. This year, he played 78 of 82 games, so it's not like he missed time. He played 2,678 minutes. He was on the court almost the whole freaking year for the Lakers, right? So it's not like he was missing there. His PER dropped to a 15. Average player, right? Again, he had that same as Julius Randle from almost a 20 to a 15. That's an all-star player to an average player. His win shares dropped from a 3.7 to a 1.7 this year. Granted, the Lakers had less wins to share, but here's where it is. His box plus minus this year dropped from...
Weston the Wizards, which is pretty embarrassing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, right? His box plus minus last year was 3.7, which you would expect that's a pretty good player. This year with the Lakers, though, when he was on the floor, was a negative 1.6. He did not make the Lakers any better, even through all their injuries, with all those young guys, all that less talent. He did not, this might be the quintessential season in showing that Russell does not elevate the people around him because his value over replacement player this year dropped to a 0.2. 0.2. Basically... non-factor. You could put anyone in his place.
Basically a league average. League average replacement guy.
Yeah.
Making $44 million.
Yeah. So with a PR drop of 4.5, box plus minus of 5.3 points worse this year, and a value a VORP drop of 3.2, I just couldn't justify putting anyone else there. And I really thought I could maybe find someone that regressed more than him.
Yeah.
But I really couldn't. Really couldn't.
Look, only reason I didn't have him because I was looking younger. I wanted to go for the younger guys. Otherwise, literally nothing you said is wrong.
Well, and here's the thing why I did include him, because although this was his age 33 season, he played. Yeah. He played a ton. It wasn't like it was his age 33 season and he had some nagging injuries, missed more games than usual. It was dude, he was out there playing just like himself.
He was their healthiest player.
Yeah, he was this year.
He was the only of their alleged big three that was healthy.
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't build your big three around an aging guard making $45 million and a dude nicknamed Glass / Data Davis. But that's another rant. But
I will also. I
certainly wasn't crying. I was not crying for the Lakers this season.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say this, for least improved, I was kind of hunting for bigger names. So my original filter that I did was looking at the top 10 in PER, box plus minus, VORP from last year, and then looking at the top 10 from this year and seeing who was in the top 10 last year that completely dropped out this year.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I started, and then that kind of helped me find some of those guys. Good reason.
Yeah, and I can't disagree with any of yours. I think it's all. I definitely see your point. So that's a good one. We'll have to keep that horny award going next year.
Yeah.
Randle gets the tiebreaker since he appeared on both of our lists.
I think that's fair enough. So if guys make it onto both of our lists, they'll get double the votes.
Okay.
Julius Randle,
Yeah, so-
congratulations! You are the least improved player this season.
I don't like to toot my own horn, but
Cut that.